How you guys doing today? Over here at Vic's house, we'll take a look at the Pathy, the infamous Pathy everybody wants a closer look at. So I'm gonna start at the front for you guys. These are a set of reworked factory arms that I lengthened, reboxed their internal structure. It's all 3/16 plate. And then I added a piece of chromoly to the front. It's kind of like a little bash plate, and angled it off. The ball joint is actually lowered about an inch and a half off of the main pivot line. And the axle is actually moved forward. I think I only moved it forward about an inch. So relocated the shock mounts. He's running just a standard Radflow 2.0 coilover. And then we made a spacer adapter here that runs it up into the tower. You can see we went back and laser cut and added some gussets to the upper control arm pivot. And these upper control arms are just boxed steel tubing. And then I drilled the spindle for a heim joint. This is a 3/4 inch heim. So everything has worked out pretty well so far. The truck is obviously a lot wider. This is 7 inches wider than it originally started. So Vic had a custom set of chromoly shafts made for this. And so far, he's broken a few inner shafts at the knuckle. I think only once here, a couple on the inside. He runs a Laka front locker. It's an Australian locker, bolts into the factory Nissan Pathfinder diff. So that's what he's got going on there. These are 35s. He's running a heim joint steering setup with an add-on gusset. I think the travel numbers were somewhere in the 14-inch travel area, I believe. I can't remember now. It's been such a long time. And he's running it strapped. Brake line is just kind of my style, where we just kind of disconnect them from their hard mounts and just pull them out and make sure that they reach and everything lines up. Runs a ham radio, and then we're running some Frontier fiberglass front fenders. Running 35-inch tires still. And then on the front, he's running an adapter that goes from the standard Pathfinder bolt pattern to a Toyota Chevy 6-lug pattern, so that he could run these 16-inch wheels. Now, he had planned ahead. He knew that he was going to probably Titan swap or Armada swap this truck, so he wanted a wheel that he could use for now, but he could use it later. And the reason for that is because in the back, he went through and swapped it out with an Armada complete rear subframe, diff, axles, hubs, brakes, factory springs. So you can see all this stuff is all factory Armada. But what that did is that gave him 3 inches per side more width. So instead of running a big spacer on the Nissan Pathfinder rear subframe and knuckle assembly to give him a little bit more width and kind of match the front is just so much wider. You can actually see how much wider it is. Even with the fiberglass fenders, it still sticks out quite a bit. But without a spacer, without a wheel adapter, he was able to bolt these 16-inch wheels on. You can see the factory hub here, and gave him a little bit more width, 6 inches wider in the rear overall. That helps the truck actually track better down the road. So far, he's done a little bit of testing. He likes the way it's handling, and everything's going pretty good. He's in the process right now of reworking the upper shock mounts. The Nissan Pathfinder shock actually goes up inside the subframe, comes up on the inside of the frame and mounts to a mount inside. And Victor and I both have been playing around a lot with this rear suspension, trying to get as much travel out of the back as we could. You guys saw in some of my videos on my truck the shock angles and different things that we were trying to do to get them to work. Just didn't really want to pan out for us too well. But this Armada swap that he's worked on here is actually working out really well. He's going to redo these shock mounts and tie them all the way into the frame on the front and back side here, and bring the shock in a little bit closer. You can see that the tire has come up here and rubbed this once. That wasn't with these, but he's in the process of reworking that. Another thing that I wanted to show you is his subframe drop. So this is a 1/4 inch 4x2 square tube. It's 1/4 inch thick, and we originally had it bolted to the frame, but after a while, a lot of trail time and stuff like that, it started to come loose. So he went back and kind of tied it in with a couple simple stitch welds to hold it to the frame to keep it from loosening up. You can see that he's no longer running the spare tire carrier bumper setup that he had before. After wheeling it, the extra weight that added to the back caused a lot of problems with his bushings and alignment stuff in the rear end with the factory Pathfinder parts. So he's hoping that with the width and the fact that all of these parts are just slightly beefier because they're off of a full-size SUV, that he won't run into any issues with premature wearing of the bushings and stuff like that. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish. We'll see how well it pans out. You can see from the rear tires that he's running on here that they're worn out pretty bad from the Pathfinder setup that he had before. These inner bushings on this rear arm right here where the spring goes in, this bushing tends to fail very quickly, as well as the bushing that's inside that knuckle right there. And that's actually part of the knuckle, so it's not an easy thing to replace. And so we were looking for some type of setup that we could, swap it out, or we were thinking maybe a uni-ball in here, but they make a lot of noise and you constantly have to clean them and rebuild them. And so we were looking for more of a factory replacement, and that's where he came up with just swapping the entire rear subframe with the Armada. And it's definitely a lot better. It's able to hold the extra weight, and it gives it the extra width that it really needs to match the front of the truck. As far as most of his other stuff that he's just got a basic slider that he bolted on. He built these himself, and they kind of bolt into the frame there. And he used these off of some scrap parts that he had from an old shop that he worked at. And so he's obviously used them. They don't get into them too much, but on the inside he's running ham radio. He does have a CB setup too as well. You can see the mole panels that I lasered for him back when I had that ability. All his patches. Interior is pretty much stock. He doesn't really mess around with a lot of that stuff. He's kind of like me. He's more, if it functions and does what it needs to do, then that's good enough. He's a lot like me in that regard. So in the back, he's running a basic little stereo setup, and then he has a pull-out drawer set up here with his kitchen and everything in here. This all locks in place, and it is extremely handy. There's been plenty of times where we've been out camping, and he's pulled this out, and we're able to cook and do a bunch of fun stuff there. So He's still rocking the Nissan first aid kit. Still got his pull-out shade. And he does still run his rooftop tent. He doesn't currently have it on there. He's able to take it on and off fairly easy. He's got a system that he uses for that. And so when he's not going to be camping, he takes it off. That way it's not dragging around, carrying around the extra weight. So hopefully once he gets these rear shocks dialed in, he's actually using some Fox shocks, Fox 2.0s that were off of my Titan that I had before, and the length of them is pretty good. It allows him fairly good amount of travel in the back here. So hopefully once he gets the upper shock mounts dialed in and gets it all set up, then we can take it out and do some testing and play around, and I'll get some video guys for that and get some pictures and just keep it rolling. But yeah, there it is. Fairly basic, but for an R51 it does really well. And I think he's still running an aluminum skid. Yep, still running the aluminum skid, and he's got a MagnaFlow muffler installed in here with a couple little turnouts. Factory muffler kind of broke and fell apart, so he ended up replacing it with this, and it works really well. It's tucked up nice up by the frame, and everything's working pretty good so far. Next on the to-do list is possibly swapping out the R180 front diff. Even though he's running a locker in there, he actually would prefer to run a locker in the rear. Doesn't really do a lot of rock crawling stuff, so it's kind of one of those things where it was available at the time, it was easier to swap out, and he was able to get a locker in his front diff, and it does make a difference. I'll cut in some videos and clips of his truck, but what he's really thinking is swapping in an M205 out of a Titan, and then coming up with a way to either shorten, or even if we had to lengthen these arms a little bit, running the Titan front knuckle spindle assembly, and then use the same CV axle in the front and in the rear. That way he only has to carry one spare axle that will work on all four corners. So we're going to do some measuring, some tinkering and playing around and see what we can do with that, but that's in the works. We're thinking about doing something with that, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I'll be here in Arizona long enough to see that come to life. He is planning to do a front bumper setup here and a skid plate section to kind of tie in, keep this lower radiator from being damaged. Luckily so far his truck, the front of the frame and everything, the radiator is very tucked back in, and he's never hit it on anything. He used to run the factory bumper support across here, and then he had a light bar mounted on it, but he's getting ready to change all that, so I'll get some more video and some more picture later on. But I wanted to give you guys a quick look, an inside look at his truck. I know a lot of people are curious about it and wanted a little bit better view of it other than, you know, random clips. So there you guys go. And it's a good looking truck. We'll hopefully be able to get it out on some little trail runs and play around, and I'll get some stuff for you guys for there. Thanks for watching. You guys have a good night.